If you've ever wondered where cultural studies first found a proper academic home, the answer lies in Birmingham, 1964. That's when Richard Hoggart established the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, known as CCCS. Pause here. This is important because Richard Hoggart introduced the very term cultural studies in 1964 asked in exam. Soon, he was joined by Raymond Williams and Stuart Hall, and together they became the founding trio of British cultural studies asked in exam. This center quickly gained a nickname, the Birmingham School of Cultural Studies asked in exam. Unlike older elitist traditions, it focused on the lived realities of ordinary people, especially the working class. Stuart Hall made it clear cultural studies at Birmingham was not about high culture but about everyday practices and their political meaning asked in exam. Note this down, the center was located at the University of Birmingham asked in exam. Hoggart himself appointed Stuart Hall as his assistant, and by 1968, Hall became the director, shaping the center's research and critical agenda. Under his leadership, CCCS grew into a major hub for global cultural theory. Early on, the center drew inspiration from Louis Althusser's structuralism. But by the 1970s, it turned toward Antonio Gramsci's Marxist revisionism. Gramsci's ideas of hegemony and the politics of consent became central for studying media, ideology, race, gender, youth subcultures, and identity. In simple terms, the Birmingham School taught us to see culture not as a decorative extra, but as a field of struggle where power and resistance constantly play out. Here's a classic UGC and ET point. The list of scholars linked with CCCS is long and important. Richard Hoggart, E.P. Thompson, Raymond Williams, Stuart Hall, Paul Willis, Angela McRobbie, Paul Gilroy, David Morley, Charlotte Brunsdon, and Richard Dyer asked in exam. Each one expanded the field, showing how culture reflects class divisions, challenges dominant ideologies, and gives voice to marginalized identities. And remember, this influence spread beyond Britain. In Asia, it inspired journals like Inter-Asia Cultural Studies. In India, it led to centers such as the Center for the Study of Culture and Society in Bangalore and the Department of Cultural Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University in Hyderabad. The center eventually closed in 2002, but its intellectual legacy continues. By institutionalizing cultural studies, the Birmingham School gave us a new lens, one that makes culture central to the study of power, identity, and resistance. So when you hear CCCS, remember, it stands for the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, asked in exam, and it remains one of the cornerstones of cultural theory. When we talk about the origins of cultural studies, one name that must always be remembered is Richard Hoggart. Born in 1918, Hoggart became one of the pioneering critics who transformed the study of everyday life into a serious academic discipline. In 1964, he introduced the very term cultural studies and went on to found the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, the CCCS, at the University of Birmingham asked in exam. This center, often called the Birmingham School, marked the institutional birth of cultural studies, and Hoggart became one of its guiding figures alongside Raymond Williams and Stuart Hall. Remember this carefully. Williams, Hoggart and Hall together are regarded as the three founding figures of British cultural studies asked in exam. Pause here and note this down. Hoggart's most important work is his book The Uses of Literacy, published in 1957. This landmark study looked at the role of mass media in shaping British culture after the Second World War. Hoggart examined pulp fiction, magazines, newspapers, and films to show how popular culture was changing working class life. Can you recall his central idea? He described a cultural drift, a movement away from close-knit working class communities with shared values and identities toward a more homogenized, manufactured mass culture. While he criticized this shift, seeing it as a loss of solidarity and social bonding, he also highlighted how media was now becoming a powerful force in shaping everyday experience. So, Hoggart's legacy lies not just in founding an academic discipline, but in showing us that popular culture matters. It reflects who we are, how we live, and how society itself is transformed. When you think of social history, one name you must remember is Edward Palmer Thompson. Born in 1924, Thompson was a historian, cultural theorist, and a central figure of the New Left. His writings in the New Left Review carried sharp critiques of capitalism, and he firmly rejected the idea that capitalism was inherently superior to the older systems it replaced. This was asked in exam. Pause here and note this down. His most influential work is The Making of the English Working Class, published in 1963, asked in exam. This book was groundbreaking. Instead of simply narrating economic change, Thompson looked at how ordinary artisans and working people between 1780 and 1832 forged their own identity. He argued that class is not just a structure, it's a relationship built through shared experiences, struggles, and solidarity. And here's another key fact: it was the first systematic study of working class history asked in exam. Now, here's a detail students often miss but examiners love. Thompson deliberately chose to use the term working class rather than classes. Why? Because he wanted to stress the collective growth of a working class consciousness. That emphasis has been asked in exam. For Thompson, the agency of the working class came from values like solidarity, mutual aid, collectivism, political radicalism, and even religious traditions such as Methodism. In this way, he challenged deterministic views of history. He showed that ordinary people were not passive victims of capitalism, but active participants shaping their own destinies. Can you recall one of his most cited essays? Yes, Time, Work Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism, published in 1967. In it, Thompson explored how industrialization reshaped time itself, forcing people into rigid schedules of productivity. Another of his key contributions was the phrase history from below. This became a central approach in the 1970s, encouraging historians to focus on the voices of workers, women, peasants, and all those usually left out of official narratives. Beyond history, Thompson had wide-ranging interests. He wrote a biography of William Morris in 1955, a late study of William Blake in 1993, a novel called The Psychos Papers, and even published poetry. So, when you think of E.P. Thompson, remember, he gave history back to the people. His concept of working class consciousness, his making of the English working class, and his idea of history from below are absolute cornerstones, and many of these have been asked in exam.